the trophy they're playing for. That is the College Football Playoff National Championship Trophy presented by Dr. Pepper, the National Championship game in New Orleans. Remember when we show you these rankings, wherever they wind up for the semifinals, the number one team will not be placed at a geographical disadvantage. That is the number one criteria. Here is the criteria used to rank and select the teams. Conference championships won, strength of schedule, head-to-head. Now, this is when teams are close at the margins, when they get together in the so-called clusters, how you separate them. If a team is deemed to be unequivocally better, then it can override.
I'm glad you said that, because I think sometimes people look at that first line and they think you have to win a conference championship in order to qualify. This is more, as you say, Reese, when it's a cluster and a close call, a way for the committee to separate one team from another.
You've been watching college football. You've seen that.
Well, you've had certainly some, we're not going to have it this year, but we've had some situations in the past. 2017, when Alabama got in, did not win a conference championship. Ohio State didn't play for a conference championship, got in 2016. But this time, it seems a near lock. Where the top four teams are going to all be conference champions. I am told that we have the top four in. We have not seen a reminder that the entire rankings will be ready about 3 o'clock Eastern time, but we have the top four. So let's count it down right now. Zach in graphics is ready, and here we go. Let's start with number 4.
We know this one.
This is going to be Oklahoma, right?
We know this one.
Boomer.
At number 4,
all right, there we go.
Oklahoma. Jalen Hurts transfers to Oklahoma. Senior quarterback, 4 years in the playoffs.
Down 25 in Waco. Come back to win that game. Go on, continue to win football games, win the Big 12, and here they are.
This series of fortunate events that have happened for them in the last couple of weeks, right? The Big 12 market correction, Baylor going from 14 to 7, Minnesota, Alabama. Oregon losing was the big one. Because if Oregon beats Arizona State, they're number 5 heading into the Pac-12 title game, and they dominate Utah, they're getting it.
And then Utah losing didn't hurt, because then it sort of eliminated and made.
And then Georgia losing. I mean, if you want to keep going on, it's more about
they needed all of it.
Everything kind of just played its way for Oklahoma to fall into that.
It's a quick question here, Joey, as before we count down and go on to number 3. Everybody thinks this is such an easy game for number 1, that this is a de facto bye and the other one's going to be a war. Oklahoma, can they compete? Big 12 has never won a college football playoff game.
All Jalen Hurts does is win. And so if you have Jalen Hurts at your quarterback position, CeeDee Lamb back, healthy, they can beat anybody because they can score points. Now, the defense has been up and down all season long. They've looked pretty good the last couple weeks, but Oklahoma will not be an easy out.
Imagine sitting here, you're a player, and all you're hearing about is Clemson, LSU, Ohio State. Who's going to luck out and be number 1 and miss Clemson? You're an OU player and coach. That's going to fire them up.
And how about this? 3rd straight year for the Sooners in the college football playoff. 4 years out of 5. You get another chance. Another quarterback. At first it was Baker for a couple times, then Kyler Murray, and now Jalen Hurts getting his shot. Let's look at number 3. We assume this is going to be the Clemson Tigers, the reigning national champions, and it is. Dabo Swinney's team won 28 consecutive games. They have won 2 of the last 3 national championships.
It's going to be interesting. And Kirk, you talk about motivation as they're eating their pizza down at Clemson. And we've seen Dabo these past couple weeks motivating his team. Talk about the disrespect that they've received. Now they're sitting at number 3, and they know they're going to get their shot at either Ohio State or LSU first. And this is this bunch here, they can't wait to get back on the field because of the things that Dabo's talked about and how they've been disrespected along this process.
They can't wait to get back to their pizza. They were like, hey, okay, all right.
Here's the difference with this year versus the other years in the college football playoff. This is the first year people fear number 3. I think for years it's been 1 and 2, and then everybody else. Remember last year? Notre Dame was number 3. They were unbeaten, but no one thought they had a shot against Clemson. They lost that game 30-3. This year, this is the team you want to avoid, and that's why it comes down to who's 1 and who's 2.
You want me to give you a little something on Clemson first? Clemson ties Alabama with its 5th playoff appearance. That's the most. You know, Dabo and our buddy Tim Bray, they're always looking for first for Clemson. 3 seed and a 1 seed for that matter. Never won the college football playoff.
Well, there you go.
Clemson could do another first.
I just would say this about Clemson. I think they could be better than they were a year ago when they won it all. And they're different in the way they attack. They're better at quarterback, better at running back, better at receiver. They're not as good on the defensive line. They're better, I think, collectively because of all that they're doing on defense with their back 7, with the linebackers, safeties, So they're sitting there with a major chip on their shoulder, feeling disrespected and excited about their matchup.
And peaking at the right time.
No doubt.
You know, they took a lot of criticism after that one-point escape from UNC, and Trevor Lawrence was throwing picks. But the way they've played now the last 6 games, they look like a national champion.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, here comes the drama.
Here we go.
Who is at number 2 and will face Clemson in a semifinal on December 28th? At number 2, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State slips from number 1 the last time Ohio State was in the college football playoff. They got a load of Clemson, 31-0. In fact, the Big Ten hasn't scored a point in the college football playoff since Ohio State won the national championship in 2014.
And I will say, much like Clemson in their close game against North Carolina, they were a different team after that. After last night's game and the Big Ten championship game was the first time Ohio State has had to face some adversity, and to come out in the second half and do what they did, they will be a much better football team now that they faced it, came back from it, and proved that they deserve to be in this playoff. I can't wait to see this Buckeye team now having gone through something and come back to the field. They will be better than they were all season long.
What I love about this matchup and build-up is what Reese just touched on. The last time they met out in Phoenix, it was a blowout. It could have been a lot worse with Deshaun Watson. That's a motivating factor for Ohio State. And in that locker room, well, you just saw a shot of Ryan Day, they're going to feel slighted because they're not sitting there at number 1. So I think both Clemson and Ohio State have something to prove when they meet up with each other in that
Basically,
Fiesta Bowl.
everybody's slighted except for LSU. Everybody feels like they are going to have great motivation.
You know, and Kirk slipped it in, and because you don't put number 1 at a geographical disadvantage in any way, that is, we'll get that officially in a minute. But Ohio State Clemson, that is going to be the Fiesta Bowl, and LSU, the Bayou Bengals, making it into the playoff for the first time. They are number 1. We'll go to Atlanta, championship game in New Orleans. Last 3 times we've had a national championship game in New Orleans. LSU has been there. LSU and Oklahoma have some postseason history, and now Jalen Hurts against LSU again. I got a note on that for you. Go first.
Well, you can get your note.
Just
close your eyes and think about LSU and now where they're at. And just look, the offense and the way that whole team has changed. They've been crazy fans for a long time. Like, LSU fans are nuts. We go there every single year. Now they're losing their mind because they got a legitimate chance to win a national title. It's been fun to watch them grow throughout the season. And I don't think anybody up here is going to say there's a defense in there that can even stop them consistently.
I love their attitude. From Coach Ogeron down through the entire team, their attitude has been, let's just get in. We don't care who we play.
You're right.
The other teams have been talking about being number 1. LSU is coming at that thing
anywhere,
like, give us anybody. We're ready to go play. I've become an LSU fan of what Ed Ogeron has done there and their attitude this entire time.
And what's strange is that's new for LSU.
Absolutely.
Because they've been a defense, ball control, field position team. They now are playing with a totally different set of toys with Joe Burrow, these receivers, the back, and an attitude led by Coach O, where they want to step on your throat every single play, every single quarter that they played this year.
And now they know they can do it. Yep. For a while, they believed they could do it. And they went into the Alabama game. It's like, hey, let's go. We got it this year.
Yeah.
Now these guys, you can watch them and see.
Burrow represents that, really. Their leader is like.
It's funny. Like I'm thinking about how the committee made this decision to flip-flop Ohio State and LSU again, and we talked about splitting hairs and the resumes and eye tests of both LSU and Ohio State very, very close. Appears to me that the committee has looked at LSU, the team peaking at the right time, maybe playing the best football now, getting in over the team that, David, you mentioned earlier, had been more complete throughout the course of an entire season in 13 games. We talked about, this is an LSU defense that gave up 38 points against Vandy. 614 yards against Ole Miss. You would think that would go into the evaluation, but I guess having watched them play extremely well against Texas A&M, and then a Georgia offense that was injured and had suspensions, they still gave them a lot of credit for beating what was a top 4 team in the SEC title game, and they've decided that that's now the 4th time we've had a flip at number 1. Started with Ohio State, went LSU, back to Ohio State, now LSU.
And Reese, and you've mentioned this to us numerous times. It also depends on who's in the room and who has to step out of the room.
Right.
And so when you move teams around, like when you all of a sudden you move a Utah out of it and you put Oklahoma back in, and when you start juggling these teams, because of the connections, it also depends on who has to step out when they start voting on this, because the numbers, metric-wise, have been in favor of LSU for the past 3 weeks, even though they jumped Ohio State ahead of them. Then all of a sudden, when the new grouping of teams comes in, the room votes again and they move LSU. Now, I don't have a problem with it, although I am surprised simply because they did move Ohio State ahead of LSU when the numbers were in LSU's favor.
You probably look at this now. You have a 13-person committee. 2 had to recuse themselves when Oklahoma was in the group of teams being discussed, Frank Beamer and Joe Castiglione, who's the athletic director at Oklahoma. So you had 11 deciding that. But that's probably not different from the other weeks leading up to it because they had to recuse themselves from that. If you look at that LSU-Oklahoma matchup, I want you to think about this for just a second. Jalen Hurts, the Oklahoma quarterback, has played on 3 teams that have faced LSU, 3-0 against him. And in each of those games, 11 points would have won the game. In 2 of those games, a safety would have won the game. This is going to be a different deal.
Not going to happen this time.
No, this will be a different deal.
The offense on the other team is
it's a little different this time around. Okay, so we've got the matchups, Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, LSU and Oklahoma. It'll be the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl, Ohio State and Clemson. Those on December 28th. Let's bring in our buddy Chris Fowler now. Chris, you look at this, and Ohio State and LSU swapped during the course of the regular season, the number 1 spot. Did you agree with the result of LSU having done enough to move ahead of Ohio State?
I did, Reese, by a narrow margin. The rationale has been well explained by you guys. I don't think it's anything Ohio State did or didn't do yesterday. Their win against Wisconsin, one going away by 8 or 10 lengths after trailing at the half-mile pole, was very impressive. But LSU beat the team the committee thought was 4th. Now, you can say Georgia was overrated, but who else was going to be 4th? And that was a virtual road game for LSU. I was in there yesterday. It was filled with Georgia fans, and from the beginning, LSU handled the pressure of a postseason game for the first time. Those guys on that roster had not been through it. They go basically on the road in a game they're told they don't even have to win to get in the playoff, and they were dominant from the start. On defense, they were flying around. I think they answered some questions on that side of the ball. They left points on the field, a lot of them, and still hammered Georgia. So that's what I think the committee was keeping in mind. That's why they got number 1, not because of anything Ohio State didn't do.
Ohio State, Clemson in the other semifinal. One thing I think that's a factor we haven't touched on yet, Chris, is that is going to be such a huge clash we anticipate, and LSU is perceived, right or wrong, at least at the moment, to have this huge advantage. But the long break between the semifinals and the national championship game, which won't be played until January 13th, is going to mitigate a little bit of that for the winners, will it not?
I think so. We've seen this unfold in the playoff era. You talk about the conference championship games versus the regular season. The intensity is ratcheted up. In the semifinal, it goes up another level. And the championship game, another level, just like playoffs in any professional sport. All the players and coaches who've been involved have talked about that. Clemson's roster has playoff experience and winning playoff experience. Ohio State really doesn't have it. Maybe a couple of the veterans were around there when they lost the last time. I think that matters a lot. I think the geographic component to this is important. If you look back at this sport, 12 of the last 13 champions have been from the South. Ohio State being the one exception in year 1 of the playoff, and it's been since year 1 that any team outside of the South has even won a playoff game. We've talked about Oklahoma losing and Michigan State and Washington and Notre Dame. So it'll be interesting to see if Ohio State could sort of end that run. But I think it's a very compelling game, a much better matchup than the last time they played when it was a whitewash for the Tigers.
It has been a while. We've mentioned that the Big 12 is the only Power 5 conference without a college football playoff win. Oregon had one in the first year, and the Pac-12 misses the playoff once again. And, these are pretty compelling semifinals we have set up.
They are. I just want one last thing on LSU. We keep talking about this year, and LSU is kind of everything has come together. How lucky are they or fortunate are they in 2019 to play in their backyard in potentially both games? Atlanta will be a big home field advantage for LSU, and if they win that game, whoever wins, Clemson and Ohio State, going basically into their backyard in New Orleans.
Yep.
So for LSU fans, they're going to Atlanta and potentially New Orleans.
Here's the thing for Clemson. Everybody's kind of...
You could go to Santa Clara. They're going to New Orleans.
Everybody for Clemson, we've heard it all year, and it's made Dabo angry that we trashed their schedule. They haven't played anybody. You beat Ohio State, and then you beat LSU. You're the national champs.
I know.
You've earned it. And they've earned the right to be in the playoff.
Oh, yeah.
And now they get an opportunity with a great matchup. That semifinal feels like a national championship.
Well, that's what everybody's going to say.
Except
leading up
LSU.
to it. And by the way, you know what? Nobody's trashing Clemson, and nobody's saying they didn't try to schedule. The ACC was down.
Down here.
It's just the
Not
way it
Clemson's
goes.
fault.
Bear, you didn't really. Christopher Leak is with us. So Bear, you didn't really expect this move, at least going into the weekend, necessarily for Ohio State to slip out of that one spot. What did you think after you saw the games yesterday?
I expected it after yesterday. Going in, like we had talked about yesterday, I had thought a couple of weeks ago the committee had made up their mind in the change, but I think what we wound up seeing was the LSU defense in the last couple of weeks get healthy, put together a couple of great games against A&M, and then yesterday against Georgia, and they answered any questions about the committee might have had about the LSU's defense. I think you look at the wins that LSU had against Florida, Auburn, at Alabama, away from home against Georgia in what was a road game, and they probably just said, hey, that stacked up better with the wins that Ohio State had. I had no problem with it. I thought they made the right move.
Yeah, so did I. And again, I would not have pounded the desk or gotten up and walked off the set if Ohio State had been number one. That would have been deserving as well, but it seems that they rewarded the two best wins of the season.